the chat in the one where I'm just putting a smiley face now. But yeah, that's
the other one. The comment is that the public chat, is it?
The public chat is the one that I can see on my end, but you'll be able to see it still after it goes there. So you'll be able to scroll through on YouTube and Facebook comments and see what people had to say as well. So, and then I'll send you all a recording of this as well. I'll just let producer know we're going. Jenny. I've got multiple screens here as well. So if you see me looking around, it's because I'm looking at the chat. It's not because I'm ignoring you and looking out the window. Important to say. And if I'm typing, it's because I've got the links you sent me, Jenny, open, and I'll probably plug those into the chat as we go so that people can see where to find out more. And I'll plug, of course, you know, picture yourself in agriculture, picture you in agriculture, sorry. And I'll also plug Farmers for Climate Action and things like that. As they come up, I can share those in the chat too so that people can see where to have a look at more, because that's what we want. People going away from this with more to think about and more to talk about and do. Ken's saying hello. He's in San Francisco. Goodness. We've got Mark, who is in Melbourne, but he's a Kiwi. We won't hold that against you, Mark. And we've got Mike is, I think Mike might be in LA. So that's within Simpatico, where they're just going into the US evening. So a lot of howdy, Mark. And Mark is also a podcaster. He runs a podcast called Climactic, where he talks to all kinds of people about climate change topics. So you never know, you might get podcast requests because podcasters are watching. Cool. Yeah, and we normally go to a little bit of a opening music at the top of the hour as well. And at the end, I'll give you some credits time. Mark says he's keen to watch and eat some rum and raisin dark chocolate like a grandpa at this time of day. Oh, I suppose it's midday. Bit of dark chocolate with lunch. Good on you, Mark. It feels more like radio to me, live streaming. It's more like talkback radio, I think, in some ways, which is really nice, as opposed to TV and other types of media, which is more of that one-way broadcast. You don't really get the same interaction. It's definitely different to being in front of a bunch of kids and hearing all their questions, I imagine, Lynn.
What time is it? 11.
Water, not beer.
Water.
Not vodka.
This is water, I assure you.
Sailors can't stay away from the water.
Not having any rum and raisin dark chocolate, unfortunately. All right. And whereabouts are you right now, Peter? Are you in Young or Harden or somewhere for the day?
No, I'm in Deakin in Canberra.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you go.
There you go. Where are you exactly?
I'm in Redcliffe, just north of Brisbane.
Okay.
Only 40 minutes from the centre of Brisbane. But yes, originally from Geelong. Hello, Mum, if you're watching on YouTube. I think Mum back in Geelong might be watching.
I knew you were from Geelong.
Everyone on YouTube chat, be nice to Julie. Hi, Julie. I think Dad's busy on someone else's farm today with some cattle, so he will be keen to watch back, I'm sure. But yes, I used to catch the number 4 Robert Lemon bus to school every day with Peter's children, who are, well, Ben would be my age, I think. Alexander's the younger one, isn't he?
Yeah, Alexander's the youngest. He's 25. Yeah. So time marches on.
Cool. Well, we're almost ready to go. So I'll cue you all in when we're good to go. Hello everyone and welcome to Climate Australia. I'm your host Lee Constable and today's episode is about the Climate Champion program and about research scientists, science communicators and farmers all being able to talk with each other through this program and the research done on that by our guest. Before I go to my guest, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm broadcasting to you, wherever you are. Right now, I am on the land of the Turrbal people, so I am just north of Meanjin or Brisbane, and I'm on the Quandamooka coast. So I'd just like to pay my respects to elders past and present and also acknowledge, given that today's episode is about farming, that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been managing the land, sea and sky and having great relationships between people and planet for tens of thousands of years. So today we will be talking about farming and climate change and being a climate champion. So I want to firstly welcome to the show Dr. Jenny Metcalfe. So Dr. Jenny Metcalfe is the Director of eConnect Communications. She's also the researcher and brain and motivator behind all of the things to do you're about to hear about and the program. And so Jenny is actually a professional science communicator with decades of experience in everything from journalism to public communication, talking to researchers about communicating their science, all kinds of things. She's a hugely experienced person that we're really lucky to have today. Welcome to the show, Jenny. And I'll briefly introduce our two farmers as well. We've got Peter Holding joining us. He is joining us down there in New South Wales. Peter is a farmer who took part in this program, and he is also someone who is heavily involved in Farmers for Climate Action. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks very much. Welcome.
Great to have you here. And we've got another farmer who took part in the program, Lynn Strong. Now, Lynn is someone from a dairy farming background, and the program's taken her on to talking to young people, whether they're in the urban environments or in the country, about seeing themselves in agriculture. So we'll get into that as well today. Welcome, Lynn.
Thanks, Lee, and great to be able to have an opportunity to talk about Jenny's research.
Yes. So speaking of which, we'll go to Jenny now. So Jenny, we're going to just give people an overview first of what the program is. Could you explain, to anyone who hasn't heard of it, what this program is and does or set out to do?
Well, the idea of it came about when I was doing communication support for the Managing Climate Variability program. And that was funded by a whole lot of rural research and development corporations. And at the time, traditional extension from research to extension agents to farmers was decreasing. So we were looking at ways of getting out the science of how to manage climate risk out to farmers. And my research at the time indicated that the best way of getting this sort of information and knowledge out was through peers talking to peers, farmers talking to farmers. So the overarching goal of the program was to get together a collection of farmers from around Australia in different commodities so that they could learn more about climate science, about managing risk, about managing climate risk on their properties, and share it with other farmers. There was also an objective that researchers would then have access to farmers so that they could learn about farming knowledge, because scientific knowledge isn't the only knowledge. And by learning about farming knowledge, that would better inform their research and the sort of products that they developed for farmers. So they were the two ultimate goals of the program, which was firstly to get peers talking to peers, and secondly to get farmers talking to researchers and vice versa, and listening to each other. So it started in the start of 2010, and I should acknowledge Kylie Poulsen from the Grains Research and Development Corporation, who was supportive of this, and also Colin Crichton, who was the coordinator of the program at the time. And they very much worked with me and our team to develop the program, to get farmers on board and to make it happen. And I've been a science communicator for 31 years, and I have to say that this is the most exciting and rewarding program that I've been involved in that whole time. It ran for 6.5 years, from 2010 to the middle of 2016. And it was just fabulous to see the sort of things that happen in the program, some of which I did not expect.
Yeah, I imagine that you must have gone into this with one idea of, ideally the outcomes, and then you're always, as a researcher, going to be, often surprised by the results that you find. And definitely, I'm sure, when you bring together these different communities and different ways of knowledge sharing, that's a really great overview. And I really wanted to now give both Lynn and Peter the opportunity to talk about what their program experience was. So we'll start with you, Peter. What did you think when you first heard about the program?
Well, at the time I was interested in the impact of climate change on our farm, like at a very personal level. And so I applied to join and really didn't have a lot of expectations. I thought it would be more of an education experience than anything else, but it's been mind-blowing, the connections that we've been able to make, the scientists we've met, the farmers we've met right across Australia, the networks that have formed out of it. The influence we've had on things like the NFF and government, it's just, and it's still continuing to this day. Like, we're still connected, as you can see here today, with Lynn and Jenny, and there's ex-climate champions in WA setting up a net zero 230 group that are trying to work with the Western Australian government and are getting places in that area. So it just continues on. I think it's amazing, and I think what it emphasises is the need for extension and communication between these different bodies. I think that's been sadly lacking in Australia. We do a lot of research and various things, but we don't tend to get that research out of the lab very often.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think I could see Jenny nodding there in the background, because it must be music to her ears as a researcher to hear you say all those things. And you said ex-climate champions, but it sounds to me like that's never really the case, which brings me to our next farmer, Lynn, as a ex, or I should say current climate champion. What has the program led to for you, and what was your kind of experience going in, or expectation?
Look, seconding both what Jenny and Peter have had to say, people are agriculture's greatest resource. And this was a program that totally acknowledged that, building the people capacity of the people on the ground. The program offered me everything I was looking for at the time. I was looking for an opportunity to surround myself with like-minded farmers who were really committed to providing safe, affordable, nutritious food for Australian families from profitable climate-resilient farming systems. People who were really tuned into the fact that we all wanted to tread as gently on the planet as we can with the knowledge and tools that we've got. Farmers who are just as nervous as me about fronting the media, an opportunity to be informed and have an active role in my community and in supporting my fellow farmers. Farmers who wanted to have an opportunity to have conversations with researchers and experts. And it was really clear from the beginning that this was a group of people who had my back. And it was just the most wonderful experience.
Yeah, and how important is it to have each other's back? Did either of you find that you were often having to defend your position as farmers in this kind of conversation?
Well, I think it's absolutely important to find a what I call a safe space to have a discussion. There's too much sort of antagonism goes on. I mean, nobody knows all the answers, and we need to respect each other's positions, even if you don't agree with them. And then we can work from the common base and try and get to an outcome. But all too often we never get to a sort of a safe spot where we can have an open and frank discussion with somebody without everybody coming to blows or something, or walking out and never talking to each other. So, I mean, that's the beauty of this program. It brought farmers from different industries, and sometimes competing industries, together and discussed what they felt was the issues at hand. And we learned, I learned many things from people that I, like sugar farmers and, people that I would never have met and never have understood their industry. And I think it's just been brilliant.
Yeah, and I think that's right. It can be historically in Australia, less so now, I think, hopefully, it has been quite political and polarizing to talk about climate change. And I know from personal experience, having, grown up my whole life in the same region as where Peter is, that it can be something that people don't agree on. I mean, I don't even always agree. Hi, Dad, if you're watching with you at family dinner, Dad. But we still have that conversation, and we still have a shared care for the land and care for nature and the environment. So I think that's always what brings everyone together. So Jenny, when you think about the research outcomes of this program, we'll start with the farmers. What were some of the outcomes for the farmers who took part from your research?
Yeah, and I should make clear that I am actually more of a practitioner than a researcher in this project. I mean, it was as a science communicator practitioner that set up the project and ran it. And one of my team, the marvellous Sarah Cole, would have almost day-to-day contact with farmers and researchers. And in many ways, she acted a bit like a marriage broker in bringing them all together and making it happen. Now, Peter mentioned one of the most unexpected outcomes of the project, which I certainly wasn't expecting when I started, and that was how much farmers learnt from each other. So I was thinking they were going to learn from researchers and that researchers would learn from them. But in fact, they learnt a lot from each other. And that to me was amazing. And it also came out of the research that I did in my PhD about the program, is how much they valued the relationships with each other. One example of that was a cane farmer in northern New South Wales, Robert Quirk, who told me yesterday he's now made his farm completely carbon neutral, which is really exciting. He was talking to a wine grower involved in the program, David Brewer. And David was growing this tall grass that he wanted to cut to create biochar, but he didn't know how to cut it. And so what happened was that Robert said, well, I could probably modify a cane harvester for you to cut that. So together, they drove it down from northern New South Wales to South Australia, adapted it, and put it on the farm, and it worked. And so that sort of interaction between the farmers to me was really exciting. And I think a lot of that came about because it was a long-term project and it allowed relationships to develop. And whenever we had workshops and get together, and we tried to do that at least twice a year, we tended to do it on farms or near farms, and we had as much time for informal interaction as we did formal interaction with the researchers. And to me, that's the secret of the success of the program, is that relationships developed. And these were personal relationships. I heard of farmers going out to dinner with scientists when they went to their city or their town. And so they formed friendships as well, which to me was really exciting. And all of those things helped to generate change. At the start of the program, we deliberately didn't say it was about climate change. We said it was about managing climate risk. Because if you remember, in 2009, 2010, a lot of people in rural communities, and especially farmers, were sceptical of climate change. And some of our original climate champion farmers were also sceptical. But I tell you what, before the end of 12 months, they were no longer sceptical. And it wasn't from necessarily what the scientists said. It was what their fellow farmers said to them in the program. And for me, that was really exciting. What my research showed was that there were probably, I could summarise it in 3 main outcomes for farmers. The first was, and Lynn mentioned this, they gained confidence by providing skills and training for them. They felt confident speaking to the media, giving presentations, interacting with a whole range of different people, their peers, but also others. So that's the first thing. The second thing I think was that because they were interacting with leading climate scientists and agricultural researchers, they developed a level of credibility within their community and across the nation. And I think that credibility really helped them and also helped them to gain confidence. And the third thing I would say is change. And that was very much about the relationships they developed with each other and with the researchers. And that, I think, everyone was changed by the process. And as someone who was helping to facilitate the program, I was definitely changed. So I think they were the main benefits for the farmers that I found in my research and what I could say anecdotally.
Yeah, well, I'd love to throw to you, Lynn, and then I'll go to Peter to give your personal experience of that. You know, what did you find from your relationships that formed and conversations you were able to have with scientists through this?
I had personally spent 25 years working out in community pharmacy. So I'm a 6th-generation farmer, but for the first 25 years of my career, I'd worked in another industry where you did have all the experts on speed dial. And so when I came back to agriculture, I was really looking for that experience. I just loved to learn, and I had a lot to learn about agriculture. And that was just so extraordinary to be able to have conversations with people like Snow Barlow and Richard Eckhart and Mark Howden. It was just extraordinary. And these people really wanted to listen to you because the research had shown that 9 out of 10 farmers learn from other farmers. They want to see the research working in their own backyard. They trust their peers first. So we were able to share that. You know, where I live is very different to where Peter lives, just the rainfall alone. And so, you know, I was able to bring people like Richard Eckhart to my region and share with him, meet our farmers. These are the barriers they face. What can we do in our region? It was just extraordinary. And I was just blown away. I think we had every single farmer in the region turn up to the field day that we ran. It just created a whole new feeling of optimism for me, and I honestly believe that we just come out of the millennial drought in our region, and certainly dairy and deregulation. There were so many challenges. I just think even bringing Richard to our region at that time through this program just gave the farmers optimism to go forward. And it's, confidence and optimism is just so important when you're in a high risk field like agriculture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that coming together of farmers is definitely something I can imagine from having been at things like that with my family for land care and things that bring people together. It's very much about what works for you and your peers and community and connection. Peter, how did you find the process? Because you're from the same region as me, not as high rainfall, and how did you find the process, and how did you find yourself and other farmers around you kind of reacting to it?
Well, I found the process was just life-changing, really. I always sort of hungered for evidence-based sort of learning and trying to get to the bottom of why things were happening. And so being able to access the scientists was special, but I don't know that it was just the knowledge that they were imparting. It was kind of the mutual respect and the relationships and just the general discussion about different aspects. And I think Lynn's right. It gave us all an optimism to face some of the challenges. Pretending that climate change is not happening or things are going to get better just by hoping they'll get better is never going to work. And so we were able to go and nut out some of these more difficult questions about what we might do, how we might restructure the farm, what type of farming we might do, how mixed it should be, what the enterprises on each farm should be or shouldn't be, and we're all about, for me, I got out of it was trying to be flexible and cut risk because of the increasing risk that we're running into. So, and it gives you hope. Like, I meet farmers that are pretty depressed after nearly 20 years of drought. We had the millennial drought till 2008, and then we had a couple of years that were almost reasonable, and then we had 2 floods and then more drought. So it's been a fun ride, but you with the right knowledge, you can sort of start to manipulate some of that a bit and make sure you can see the train coming down the line and step aside and let it go past and then continue on, sort of thing. So yeah, it was life-changing for me. And I mean, I've got involved with all sorts of things now with FCA and trying to take the message to a broader community, which in itself is an interesting exercise. But I think Jenny and the communicators for starting me down this track of being able to talk to people and understand a bit.
Yeah, and I think the thing is we've been talking a lot about what the farmers learnt from each other and the researchers, but the researchers also had things to learn, which is something that Lynn alluded to, bringing a researcher down to her area. Jenny, what did you find from them when you looked at the program?
Okay, so we had about a dozen researchers involved throughout the 6.5 years of the program, more or less fairly regularly, and there were about 3 who were involved constantly. People like Andrew Watkins from the Bureau of Meteorology, Graham Anderson from the Department of Agriculture, and also Peter Heyman from South Australia. And when I surveyed them, when I asked them questions, again, 3 things came out. The first one was access. They really valued the access to around 40 to 45 farmers from a range of different enterprises from around Australia. We had beekeepers involved in the program. We had extensive beef producers involved in the program. We had winemakers involved in the program, which made our dinners pretty good sometimes. So that access to be able to listen to and ask farmers was really good. One of our farmers, Peter Whipp, who is a extensive beef producer from Longreach in Queensland, I remember that he couldn't make the first workshop in Brisbane, so he came to one in Western Australia. Before he came, he contacted all the local West Australian climate farmers and went and visited them before coming to the workshop in Perth. And that made us realise that we needed to have workshops out in the region. So we took the scientists with us out to the region when we had workshops. And that was really, really beneficial because they learnt a lot from that too, which is really, I think, the second thing was that they got this trusted, they started to trust the farmers. And so I actually analysed some conversations they had at one of the last workshops that we had between researchers and farmers, and I analysed the dialogue as part of my research. And one of the things that came out very strongly was that the scientists were saying things they would normally never have said to farmers about things they were uncertain about the level of risk and what they didn't know, and about their own institutions that they would never have said normally. And that came after, I think, 6 years of developing relationships. And so that trust was really important, I think. And it was interesting that they were participating with each other, and from that sort of program, they were better able to transfer information and to have a dialogue and to listen. So it was interesting to see that happen. They also changed things. So without exception, every researcher involved in the program said they changed something as a result of their interactions with the farmers. They may have changed their research design. They may have changed how they did their research or where they did their research. They changed how they packaged and communicated that research. So the knowledge and the experience of being with farmers changed the research process. And to me, that was really exciting.
Yeah, and I think having spoken to a lot of climate scientists and farmers, you know, I think everyone's so busy defending their position that they feel like, you know, the scientist feels like if I reveal to them things I don't know that I actually would like to research, then all the people who are climate deniers are going to co-opt this and try to use that to say I don't know anything. And there's this kind of, I think there's this reluctance to kind of share that, and that harms us all, doesn't it? We've got some great comments coming through. If you're joining us on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to chat as well. I'm just looking at some of the comments in the Simpatico chat. We have Mark saying that he finds it encouraging to hear a true blue bloke like Peter say there needs to be safe space for discussion and engagement on climate. We can't always be battling trolls. And we've got a hello to Anika Molesworth. She's someone known to anyone and everyone in climate and farming. She says getting scientists out into the regions and translating research outcomes into how it can be applied into the paddock is so important. Absolutely agree with that, Anika. Also, hello to Casey Whitelaw, who I know is watching there. He's actually someone who's just started a startup that is to do with the carbon market and hopefully getting more money into farmers' pockets to put some of that carbon back into soils. Hello to you, Casey. We had a question from Mark. Mark was just posing, talking about ruminant herds like cattle and saying, you know, about how they've found different feeds make a difference. And we've definitely seen the beef industry, for instance, just recently talking about the sustainability going forward in the future for the industry. And they're having very open discussions now about ways they can adapt the industry, I guess, and the farming practices, not only to climate crisis, weather change as a result of climate change, but also to the change in markets. Does that give you kind of hope when you see these kind of political changes? And I know, Peter, you mentioned FFA, the federations kind of changing their tack.
Yeah, it does give you hope, and I think the farmers these days are changing faster than the general public would recognise. I mean, I think they would be shocked at the amount of technology and sort of intellect that's applied to farming these days, from genetics to, you know, to managing soils to dodging climate bullets. You know, like it's quite interesting. I think what I found also is that we developed a level of trust with the researchers so that we could get behind the mask of certainty and start to unpick what like scientists, if we've learned anything out of coronavirus, we've learned that we need to listen to the experts, I think. And then we need to analyse what they're saying and work out how it fits for us. And that's the tricky bit. And that's where I think people like Jenny and the extension services that we've lost need to be replaced, because it's that connected communication that is so often missing, which just prevents us transferring the knowledge.
Yeah, because we can know how the climate's changing, or we can know how a virus impacts the body, but if we don't know how it impacts people's lives and livelihoods, where are we going to go with it? That's a great point. So, Lynn, what do you think from your perspective you've seen kind of come out of the program for you and for your region, beyond the program as well, just politically, the chats that are happening right now?
What it did for me was show me what a group of people could do together. We've all heard that meme, alone we are smart, together we're brilliant. And this group of people really showed that. And it gave us the confidence to really reflect on what our passion projects were and get involved in those passion projects. And Peter mentioned at the beginning how many offshoots have come from this. There was a whole Earth Hour. Earth Hour was all around the impact of climate on food, and all of the climate champions got involved in that. So a national cookbook was created that paired famous chefs' recipes to what was happening on farms. There was a documentary around that, and out of that collection of people, Farmers for Climate Action came together. And then Simon Warwick and his team in Western Australia, Ag Zero 2030. So many things have come out of this program. And from my perspective, it inspired me to create a program called the Young Farming Champions, which Anika Molesworth is an alumni of. And I just saw that the importance of building people capacity in my generation. Imagine what we could do with exciting young people that are queuing up for careers in agriculture. So we see that program as Agriculture Succession Plan. We're growing tomorrow's leaders today. We're doing the same thing that Jenny and her team did. We're training them, we're giving them a safe practice to learn. We're helping them to multiply their impact in schools. And they're saying exactly the same thing that all the farmers in our group saying. It's having that network of people from different industries coming together to see that we really do have common problems. We can all learn from each other, and together we can all achieve collective impact and collective action. It's just been a total game changer for agriculture.
We can stop being victims. We can get out there and make the change.
Yeah, you can be the champions. And I think that's a great word. Championing a cause, championing, a movement, things like that are really important. It's so cool to see all the ripple effects that have come out of this program. And I'm sure there are so many ripples that might not be so visible, but are equally important and happening all the time. We've had a question from Ken here on the chat in Simpatico. He says, I assume a lot of these researchers were city kids. What was your honest assessment? How were they when it came to working in the field? How bad were they?
I've probably got some experience in that. We work with CSIRO for 25 years now on a long-term project. And the group that the board sort of organisation we set up, which was Hardin Landcare, Hardin Murrumborough Landcare, I better get it right or I'll get shot when I get home. For about 5 years, there was a communication problem, and it was based around trust and understanding. The scientists wanted to tell us only what they were absolutely certain of. So an example of, a farmer go out and ask the leading scientists in Australia how much nitrogen should they put on their paddock. And, the scientists would come back and say, oh, well, we need to know all these things about the bulk density and all the rainfall and what the paddock history was and how, all the soil structure and all the rest of it. And of course, the farmers wouldn't have all that information, so they couldn't get an answer. But at the end of the day, we eventually got to the point where the scientists realised that all the farmers wanted was their best bet. They didn't want it to, they didn't care if it was accurate or slightly not correct or whatever. But if the guy said, well, you need 80 kilos or 50 kilos of N on this part, he knew like that. And we got to the point now when they do research, we're implementing their outcomes before they've even written the reports. Like it takes them about 12 months now. We're part of the design project. When they come up with a research project, they'll discuss it with us as to whether we think it's going to work and what we should do. So they might plan it more timely. There was lots of issues about how they did research that weren't quite right, and farmers would say, oh, that'll never work because it's all wrong. But once we got all that sorted out, now when they do research, they don't have to wait. As soon as they strip the damn thing and they discover what the answer is, we'll be doing it by the next 12 months. There's not this sort of generational change in extending the stuff out.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the problems in science as a whole, not just in agricultural science, that there's this, doing the research gap to publication for multiple reasons that I'm sure the researchers you've become friends with have talked to you at length. And then, application of that research can sometimes not even happen, sadly. So I think these are really great points to bring up. Even as a student in science, I'd spent my whole life, growing up on the farm in the same region as Peter's region, with my family working alongside with other farmers in Landcare that Peter mentions, and going to the classroom was even interesting for me, and having city kids that I was working with, and I was studying plant genetics, biology, everything, as well as climate environmental science. And so the city kids would read the paper and be like, all right, the farmers just need to do this. And I was like, okay, well, where's Dad going to read that? And what does that mean for that paddock that's like a bit hillier and has more rocks in it? And have you considered the thistle problem in Gaylong? Like, it was really interesting. I felt like a bit of a dingus going into those kind of university lectures, but by the end, actually, I had some great tutors who were like, I'm glad you said those things, because these city kids, they go on to be, scientists, and they need to think about the end user. Lynn, did you find that you were able to impart some wisdom to these researchers when it came to, what they could include that would really help your area?
Look, I found it was beautiful mutual respect. It was really both for the farmers and for the researchers, that really most important thing, start where people are at. So it all starts with the conversations, the relationships. And it's been a beautiful thing. I've got a lot of young PhD, young farming champions, who started out sort of at the beginning. The program's been running for 10 years now. And we've got a lot of young farming champions who've become researchers. And they would say it is just so fantastic to have that knowledge. And my science is important, but the social science is just so much more important when you really understand what the barriers are to get that research out of the kitchen and into the paddock. Because I think I saw somewhere, I might be wrong, tell me if I'm wrong, Australia has one of the lowest translation of research from the lab to the paddock. Is that correct? Am I correct in saying that? And so the fact that the government basically stopped extension must be the craziest decision that they have ever made. And it's having that capacity to have farmers and researchers work together. We can do extraordinary things in this country. So that connection is just pivotal, absolutely pivotal, to have that mutual respect. Let them talk to each other, have the conversations, learn to start where people are at. Yeah, it's critical.
And this comes to a really important point. On this program, I really want it to be a space where we can get into the nitty-gritty of what needs to change, like on a big scale, to help these individual things. What individual things collectively make a big scale change? So at the moment, we've kind of alluded to things like, obviously the industry bodies and those things need to be advocates for farmers when it comes to, the future of their markets, the future of their farms in the face of climate change. But then we also have kind of talking about policies around how publication happens and how we get science applied even before it's published. And then you've got this other point coming in where you're talking about what's funded, you know, and whether that's the research itself or actual extension to farmers. And we've seen kind of rollback of funding for things like land care. Would either of you like to talk about what are some of the big changes that if you could snap your fingers and be like, this is funded, this research happens, this is what happens for our farmers, what would you say you'd want to see happen?
Well, for me, I'd like to see more community empowerment. I think one of the problems we've got is that, I don't know if it's because we live in a very affluent, comfortable country, but we don't seem to recognise that there are huge problems in this country, and many people don't feel they have a voice. I mean, somehow or other we've got to get to a point where everybody feels that they have a right. Well, not so much a right, but they can be heard. And if it's a logical, sensible point that they're making, I think they would be shocked to find that many other people think the same way, and then we can start doing something about it. But we're being dictated to by a sort of an elite group, in my view, that don't understand what the common man's doing out here on the land or in the city or anywhere else. I mean, I look at the coal miners, and I'm involved in the climate debate. We've got to shut down fossil fuels. Well, yeah, I think that's going to happen whether they like it or not. And we're going to suffer the consequences whether we like it or not. But what we should be doing is recognising and respecting the fact that the world has got to where it's got because of the coal mining industry for the last 100 years. It's driven the whole of manufacturing and everything else. So we ought to respect that, and we ought to find ways to make their journey into a new life, doable. Not just say, oh, tough luck, your industry's shut, you're on the scrap heap. That's not the way to do it.
Yeah, I find it's very Australia. We have this.
I lost something.
Lee, we can't hear you.
Oh, that was my bad. Sorry, I had a bit of a background noise earlier and turned my mic off. I was just going to say, Peter, I find in Australia, politicians like to say, think of the farmers when it suits them. And they like to say, think of the coal miners when it suits them. But quite often the politicians are from these rich city places. The people who are actually benefiting the most from coal mining are the people who are going to be harmed the least from a transition out of it. So it does make sense, we have to be giving coal miners, farmers, we have to be giving people, on the ground options of new ways to work as things change. Yeah, so how about you, Lynn? Did you have any words to add to that?
I'd certainly like to second Peter's comments about people empowerment. People are Australia's greatest resource, and one of the things that I would like to see is that be celebrated by, to start with, our politicians. This concept that we're all getting out of bed to support the GDP, we've got to provide people with a vision that gives them joy and hope. And it really saddens me, for example, the National Farmers Federation doesn't have a people pillar. And so it's our politicians to start with sending the wrong message to Australia. Send the right message to Australia. People are Australia's greatest resource. Empower them. Help them all be critical and creative thinkers, lifelong learners. Help them be informed so they can have polite discourse. The reason why we're all at each other's throat, because, we're not sure if we have the necessary knowledge. I mean, the Australia Institute report this week, people totally overestimating the value of the gas industry to Australia's economy. I work and I survey people right across Australia. People totally underestimate the value of agriculture to our economy. So it's so important we get our messaging right. We provide our ambassadors with the right messages to get out there and share exactly what the value of the people are that are making this country such a magnificent place that we can all be proud of. And and that message starts with the government, them being role models and them valuing the people in this country and empowering them to help them see that we're all on the same page, give them agency, give them ownership of the solutions, and let's have collective impact and collective action. have faith in the people that give you the power.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and it's great to see that you're not just, alone in saying that. We've got your programs that you've kind of launched, that you mentioned, that Anika's a graduate of and out there being a very public advocate, and I know many others are as well. I guess as far as what people might be thinking as they're watching this, if someone is watching and they're in the city, what do you think they should do to find out more, to be a part of this, to get more connected with agriculture?
Well, come and visit if you want to be overrun, and it's nice to ring them up and tell them you're coming rather than just invade their property. But, most farmers are quite happy to have people come and look at their farm. They love nothing better than to talk about their favourite sheep.
I have to say, I'm a city girl. And one of the things that I loved about this program was that I think I went to almost every farm that the Climate Champions had, and that was just such a highlight of my life, is being on farm, talking to the farmers, finding out how they operate. It was a complete and utter joy as a city girl to experience that and to understand that. I learned so much from being involved in the program myself.
Like that's what we do at FCA. We rely on our farmer volunteers to get the message out. So the reverse applies. If you want to know, if you live in the city and you want to find out something about what's happening on Australian farms, if nothing else, give us a ring and I'll find some farmer for you that you can go and talk to.
So that's Farmers for Climate Action for anyone who's watching.
And I personally love to know how city people would like to connect with us. I just love that. Like we're in schools with our programs. There are lots of fabulous things going on in across Australia that agriculture is doing to connect. The one thing we could do is do a big stakeholder mapping of that and provide people. So we in agriculture can do a better job with sharing with our urban cousins how they can connect with us. And so if you want to lobby for that, let's get some stakeholder mapping out there so we can find out how we can connect our urban cousins with our country cousins. Yeah.
Given we can't travel overseas at the moment and not too far even within Australia, maybe this is a great opportunity for people in the city. Get out and see our rural parts of our state a lot more than we have today.
Yeah. And I know Lynn and I were talking before we went into the interview about not just agriculture, but also hospitality and the tourism industry and what that all has to do with our economy here. And the regions can and are a part of that. Anika Molesworth in the chat here in Simpatico has said she was told repeatedly, publish or perish when studying science. But if tweeting research outcomes reaches a far larger audience and a better audience, including farmers who can apply the knowledge, do we need to be training researchers to communicate in new and more impactful ways? What would you say, Jenny?
Absolutely. And that's one thing that we continue to do in our business, is to train farmers. In the last month, I've been training farmers via Zoom, via this sort of online mechanism rather than face-to-face, which you lose that, I think, personal touch. But it's still been really good, and we've trained researchers in Africa, in Melbourne, in Brisbane in the last month to speak to the media, to use social media, to write in a way in which people can better understand.
Yeah, and shout out to eConnect Communications. Look up Jenny's business. She's the director of eConnect Communications, and I'm sure she can tell you all about that if you are a researcher wanting to communicate more impactfully with farmers, or a farmer maybe wanting to talk to researchers as well. Thank you. Go for it.
Sorry, Lou. One of the things I'd add to that, though, is, I mean, scientists are, they're a particular breed. I hate to say that, but they are, and they have a lot of hard thinking and work to do, and they don't have a lot of time, a lot of them. So, and the thing that I think is missing is that there's no or little respect for facilitators, people like Jenny in this world that know how to do the communications, know how to build the links. I mean, it's a serious business, facilitating. It's not something that you just get somebody out of university and throw out in the crowd and say, do it. You need experience, you need understanding, you need all sorts of things. And that's where I think the hole in the system is. Like if we can't find the facilitators, you're not going to bring the farmers up to speed to talk to the scientists or give the scientists an understanding of how to talk to farmers.
Well, Jenny and I, as climate communication practitioners, did not pay Peter to say that, but I think we both can agree that we do need more people, within research institutes, within, communities that work alongside various universities, to have these kind of facilitator roles, these communicator, gap bridger roles, and be able to translate information and broker relationships and build trust, because it's obvious, the value of what someone like Jenny's done through being a practitioner and doing this program, and then going, I'm going to do all this research because people need to see the benefit of this. Do you think, Jenny, there's enough opportunity for participatory programs like this?
No, in short. But what I should say before going into that a bit more is that I feel an enormous sense of privilege to have been involved in this program and to have met and worked with people like Lynn and Peter. It's just amazing. I mean, a few of them contacted me yesterday to say they couldn't be involved today on the chat. And it brought tears to my eyes to be in touch with them again and to hear what they were doing and how they were going. So I feel enormously privileged to be involved in this program. I'd also like to acknowledge 3 of the members of our program who are no longer with us, unfortunately. Jennifer Hawkins, Janan Cannon and Bill Yates were very active and passionate members of our program. And I and others in the program still feel their loss enormously. And I think that's a mark of how the relationships were in this program and how important it was. I don't think there is enough support for these sort of programs. I mean, Lynn and Peter talked about the need to empower people. I think these programs do empower people. It's interesting that the demise of the program, perhaps not the demise or the ending of the program, happened, I think, and I'll be frank here, because I think the funders were afraid of what was happening with the program. People like Peter were getting into climate action. People like Lynn were getting involved in influencing young people. And it was going a bit beyond their comfort zone. And the other thing was that a criticism that I heard was that it had become like a social club. And I don't think that was a bad thing. I actually think the social nature of it is where a lot of the change and the power came. But for people who are used to funding research and straight research, that was, I suppose, a very scary space to be in. So I think that's one of the big barriers, is that our leaders in research funding and research management in governance need to take risks and look at the power of people. It's not just black and white, and a social club can create huge change. So if we were a social club, we did create huge individual, and I would suggest wider change. Programs like this were
Jenny, sorry to cut you off there, Jenny. I think your mic might be getting a bit of a buzz. You might have to plug it in and out again. Let's try again.
How is that?
Oh, that's much better. Sorry, what were you saying?
Okay. I was saying that, did you hear the last bit that I said?
Oh, we could hear you. It was just buzzy. It just got a bit more buzzy just at that point.
Okay. Well, what I was about to say is that programs like the Climate Champion program was expensive, and it was because of the time that it took and the resources that it took. As I mentioned, Sarah in our team was in daily contact with farmers and scientists, which is, I think, part of what Peter was talking about, that facilitation process that helped to create and to nurture the relationships that were developing, which was so important, and to provide that support so that farmers could have the confidence and have access to facilities that they don't normally have. So it's not cheap. But I think, it's really hard to measure the outcomes of a program like this. And it's hard to know the impact, for example, that it's had with peers of the farmers. And no one's really done that research, and I'm not sure where you would start. If I was running this program again, I would think about how you might do that right from the start, how you might evaluate the impact it has beyond the obvious. And that might help prove its value. But I think if our leaders are willing to take some of the risk, are willing to listen and to understand what farmers and scientists want and what's going to be useful for them to progress us as a nation, as individuals in different enterprises, then I think it will really help. A message for all researchers is, if you want to create real change, start engaging with the people that you want to change right from the start, and you'll find yourself changed by the process as well in the positive direction. So that engagement has to start right at the start and has to be continued on and nurtured on. And I think it's worth its weight in gold in the investment of time in making those relationships work.
Yeah, it certainly seems that, oh, I'm just having a bit of feedback here. It certainly seems that the program has had all these ripple effects, and some of them are maybe easier to see and to measure than others. It's definitely an important thing when a lot of people are dealing with grants, and they're often government grants and other bodies that want reporting, and they want you to be able to prove your worth every step of the way. And especially, you know, alluding to that idea that perhaps when you start making waves with these ripples, certain people who hold purse strings don't actually like it. So maybe that's the biggest indicator of the success of this program. We are coming up to the end of the hour. I have to say this conversation has been just great, and I hope this is the first of many. If you are watching and you're a farmer, or you're someone who works in that space between, like Jenny, as a translator, communicator, bringer together of worlds between different worlds in agriculture and beyond, let me know if you want to chat on this program. I want people to use this as a resource. I also don't want this to be the only chat we have about this program and its impacts and with its participants. So if you're a participant watching and you want to be on and you want to have a say, come on, let me know, get in touch. If you're watching on Facebook, you can send me a message there on Facebook, or on YouTube, same thing. Or if you're one of the farmers who's interacting, I know lots of farmers on Twitter were getting excited about this program and whether or not they could make it. Feel free to reach out there as well. And I'm on Simpatico TV right now. It's free for anyone to join. We don't sell your data. You can sign up, make a profile, and then you can be in the live audience where I've been seeing Anika. She's already there to welcome you. See, you've got someone who's a familiar face. And come in, introduce yourself. Let me know if there's topics you want me to tackle, if there's the types of scientists, researchers in climate change, whether it's the science of it or the social side of it or the economics of it, that you want to hear from as a farmer. You're welcome to use me as a resource. Tell me what you want to learn, and come on and be in the live audience, and we can have some PD just through me interviewing them for your pleasure, and you can ask some live questions. So yeah, I just wanted to give you an opportunity before we wrap up, to just give everyone any take-home messages you want. We'll start with you, Lynn.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And Australia, it is all about people power. So let's all have a commitment to be critical thinkers, get as informed as what we possibly can, identify the people who really want the best outcomes for this country, and join them. Let's start a movement together, Australia. This is a great country.
That's a great call to action. And Peter, what would you like to add?
Well, I'd like to agree with Lynn and think that people need to come together and try and work together as best they can. But I'd also like to point out we've got a Regional Horizons program that we've put to the government. Part of that is developing regional hubs, which is about facilitation of the community with interaction with government and knowledge and various things like that. Unfortunately, the minister seems to have misinterpreted what we're on about a bit, and is going to set up 8 regional hubs in 8 universities, which I suspect is going to be more research and not so much extension. But anyway, we'll keep working on that. But yeah, come together and and this is a critical time in Australia's development. I think we're at a period of change, and we need to work closely together.
Absolutely. And then Jenny, if you want to give any final remarks to people watching before we go.
Well, leading on from what Lynn and Peter have said, I actually am very sceptical of governments and politicians, and I think we need to find a way to work without them. So if we can make some of this happen without governments, if there are any philanthropic funders out there who can make this happen and can see the vision of the people that are on the ground, then I think we're going to make huge change happen.
All right, if you have some money and you're watching and you need a place to put it, call Jenny. She's got plenty of great ideas. She'll put you in touch with Peter and Lynn and everyone else, and you can make a lot of good change happen regardless of what the government's up to. Thank you so much to all three of you.
FCA is not government funded. It is.
Funds for Climate Action, not government funded. That should give me, it shouldn't, but it gives me more hope that it will stick around. so that's great. Thank you all so much, and thank you to everyone who was commenting and watching YouTube, Facebook, and here in Simpatico TV. This has been another episode of Climate Australia, and I hope will also be another one of many when it comes to agriculture and climate and the change we want to see in the world. So thank you all so much, and you can feel free to log off whenever you like and go about your beautiful days in your beautiful parts of the world where you are. And yes, stay in touch. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Oh dear.